we can start with the toast for the audience. We have an EduAction mug where we are enjoying our tea, and as we call it, tea and talk over EdTech.
Yes.
That's the theme. We'll be true to our time, and we will make sure that this session delivers value to all our audience here. The purpose of EduAction is also to say that instead of theoretical discussions, we would like to focus on actionable and practicable insights, which the audience can take away and benefit from it. So, Professor RC, let's start with the discussion for today. And my first question to you is, you have had a long and illustrious career spanning multiple nations. So please walk us through your whole interaction and the gamut of learnings you've picked up on your way with regard to education and technology and the combination thereof in your last many years of education and professional experiences.
Thank you, Mr. Arpit. And to begin with, I think congratulations on starting this very important talk series, and thank you for your kind introduction as well. Yes, I think if I reflect back on my own professional journey, it did start obviously like everybody else as a college-going student, right? So as a student, I gathered my own experiences, which started within Indian education system, right? After doing my master's, I went to the US and did my PhD, and I spent 5 years. And of course, the education systems there, and no, the way they actually use technology, it was completely new to me, right? So no, all the way from the way you, I'm sure no, you yourself can understand that, right? The way you register enrollment, and no, we used to enroll for courses on telephone, right? So they used to say that if you want to register for this particular course, press 2. So that was a very different experience. So as a student, my own experience and touch with technology for education kind of evolved and evolved and evolved. And once I finished my education, I came back to India. And for exactly a decade, I chose to spend time in the industry. Basically just developing software, enterprise software, and things like that. But then that's when I realized, once the clock ticked over 10 years, that's when I realized that actually my true calling is in academia, right? And that's when I jumped over to IIITB, and I've been here ever since. And so that's when I actually fell in love with technology for education. In fact, that was my first opportunity to try to make a difference, right? Because until then, I was at the receiving end of the technology. And so when I landed up at IIITB, it was wonderful, right? So IIITB in itself, so you can imagine, about 15 years ago, the institution was just 8 years old, and it was almost in startup mode. And you can very well understand that that is the most fertile period for trying out new ideas without any barriers. So that's when, to use a very informal language, I kind of freaked out with all looking at all kinds of gadgets and technology for education. And so that's when my own exploration of technology for education started. And along the way, I picked up 4 PhD students who have graduated working on exciting things with education technology. So I think things have only become better and better over the decade. And needless to say, right, notwithstanding all the improvements that have happened over the years, we have to admit that the COVID pandemic actually has opened up the chinks in the armory, if I can use that term, because it kind of shows to us that it actually showed 2 things, right? So one is that the inevitability of using technology for managing education. I mean, it has now become a non-negotiable. So now, once it has taken that kind of an importance, obviously that also brings out lots of unseen use cases and challenges which were hitherto not seen. But as a researcher in that particular area, it is an exciting period of working on opportunities. So it's been a wonderful journey for me looking at this. And as I said, things are only looking up, and I also believe there's still a lot more to be done.
All right. So, there has been multiple tools, multiple technology paradigms that you would have interacted with and engaged with over the years. For our audience today, and as we said, we want to give people a real insight. Um, what are the three biggest learnings with regard to adoption of technology in an institution that you would like to share with our audience today?
I think that's a very good question. Now it only becomes the challenge is to pick up what those top three are. So what I will do is I'll probably try to abstract that a little bit, because this also depends upon the technology maturity of the institution as well. Because as a and that's there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because traditionally education institutions, the primary goal is to impart education. And if you are able to, if you have students in front of you, and then if you have a teacher, right, so that is what they are supposed to be doing extremely well. But as it turns out that in my view, there are attention has to be given to three broad areas, right? So what I call as academic administration is one. Second is academic, the delivery, right? So the delivery for learning. And the third is assessments, right? So these are, I think, broadly one should have a strategy and roadmap and your own wish list and tool list organized into these three categories, right? So let me clarify each one of them and spend a couple of minutes on that, right? So let me go to the one that everybody can relate to very well, especially during these times, which is education delivery. Correct. So when you talk about education delivery, it's all about what kind of teaching aids are at your disposal to be an effective teacher, to impart education, right? So you have the teachers on the one side, in fact, right? So teachers are no longer supposed to be the ones, so the know all kind of a people. They are the ones who are supposed to be facilitators, right? So you have the teachers on one side, and then you have the learners on the other side. So when you want to make that dialogue effective, right? So one may be left thinking, oh, okay, so I need tools and technologies only when I'm doing online classes. So that the first myth that I want to debunk, saying that even when you're doing face-to-face in classroom classes, one must pay attention to what kind of a role technology can play in to enable one to be an effective teacher, in to be effective in delivering, right? So which is where all those initiatives of smart classrooms and things like that that everybody would have heard of, that would come in handy, right? It is perfectly okay. No, I still know of professors who say that, no, just give me a blackboard and a chalk, I'm very happy to teach. I mean, with all due respects to them, definitely that is good. But now if you add a touch of technology to that, let me take that as an example. I can still continue to give something to write in the hand of the teacher, which is not a chalk but a stylus, and then not a blackboard but a smart board. But then the teacher continues to teach the way they love teaching, because it's important to keep the teachers happy, right? So they have to be within their comfort zone. But the moment you make this particular tool available to them, then they're able to write whatever they want, and they don't have to erase ever. And the same thing, at a click of a button, it can be saved as a class notes, and it can be shared with the learners, with the students. So the students are not frenetically writing away without paying attention to what is being said. So you can just imagine, right? So just this one simple technology aid can transform this whole learning experience, both for the teacher as well as the student. So when you my point is that so we have to keep our eyes and ears open as to what are technology to enhance this learning delivery process. Okay, because I'm not even equating this to online. Of course, when you bring in online into this picture, that adds its own additional dynamics. So that is the something that probably everybody should start adapting. If institutions are looking to adapt technology, I would say that the first step is probably to try to make your classroom smart. Okay, and there are many ways, tools, technologies that are available. And the second important aspect comes administration, right? So because these days when we talk about all the paperwork that goes into registering for classes and so on, again, so I'm able to contrast my own experience when I was studying in India versus the time when I went to the US, right? So when you bring in technology for academic administration, it definitely improves efficiency, and it reduces errors. These are the two most important elements as to why the aid of technology should be taken for academic administration, right? So errors are not made. There's no spelling mistake in the transcript that is given, right? I mean, there's accountability, there's security, etc., etc. We can keep talking about that. So that is probably in the second level of maturity. I think that is something that everybody must look at. And when I'm talking about academic administration, depending upon the nature of the institution, there could be many systems that need to be put in place. Again, I want to clarify here that academic administration is not a single function, right? So we know it can be all the way from managing the finances to enrollment, to managing the people, hostel, grades, transcripts, certificates, the whole gamut of things, right? So which is why, very interestingly, there are a lot of packaged software that is emerging, right? Including, I know I do want to mention the academia software, which IIITB is also using. So this family of software is referred to as academic ERP, right? For those who are not familiar, so ERP itself, enterprise resource planning, is a traditional is a term that has been used for a very long time, primarily for enterprises and specifically manufacturing. So that's where it all started. But then, so the whole idea is to provide an integrated view of the entire enterprise. But then it also turns out that the way an education institution is administered is very different from the way a company is administered. So, which is where your traditional ERP kind of a software may not be very useful. So, you may have to look for what is referred to as an academic ERP, which is focused on students, teachers, how they do their work, what is the processes, approvals, and stuff like that. So that is the second important piece, which is your academic ERP for academic administration, right? And then the third piece, in which is called assessments. Okay, uh, where what role can technology play in the assessment space? Okay, so just to use the more colloquial term for assessments is examinations, right? So when we talk about examinations, so there are incredible amount of administrative activities that are involved in examinations, and that a majority of that can get absorbed under academic administration. But when I'm using the term called assessment, it's the actual process of conducting the exam, or the students writing the exam, they turning in their answers, and the answers getting evaluated, graded, and then marks awarded, students trying to see their reports, raise objections, right? So there's a whole gamut of things that universities are obligated to do. So what role can technology play? So this is definitely an emerging area right now. All the way from automated assessments to assisted assessments and so on. So no, but there are lots of interesting solutions. For example, at IIITB itself, just before the pandemic forced us to shut down the campus, we used to use a very interesting gadget, which is like a custom built tablet for students to write the exam. So what happens is, students, the question paper gets displayed and students write the exam right there. And once the exam is over, it gets uploaded to the cloud immediately, and they are available for grading anytime, anywhere. Just imagine the improvement in efficiencies I can get, rather than collecting bundles and bundles of paper. Again, efficiency and room for error. Both these are, by efficiency goes up, errors are eliminated. So that is a whole gamut of technologies that are there, that are emerging. But I think if you talk about all three of them, yes, I think the most mature is the classroom, the teaching aids and so on, which has been there for a long time. But something that has currently achieved fair amount of maturity are the academic administration software, academic ERP. And what is work in progress and evolving and improving are the assessment class. So that would be the third category of software. I think these are, if institutions want to embrace technology, I think you should kind of put it in these three buckets and start checking off things that you want to do there.
Wonderful. That's quite comprehensive a framework. I'll call it the ADA framework, which is academic administration, academic delivery, and assessments, as you said. And I think that captures very well the 360-degree needs of institutions today and a plethora of solutions that are available in each of these three buckets. So I understand you have played in this entire spectrum for your own institution or as a teacher yourself, etc. What are, moving on, I mean, what are, let's say, 2 or 3 most important things to keep in mind when you're adopting these kind of solutions? So what must educators who are part of this audience today, or education leaders, or even, let's say, students for that matter, what must be kept in mind at a macro level to make sure that the adoption of these tools is successful based on your experience?
Great question. I think that's a wonderful question, because we can always, I mean, I'm sure you also sense that people always must be saying, it is easier said than done, right? All the three things that I talked about. I think that's a wonderful question, right? I think the topmost thing is to take on board the stakeholders who are involved. Because for each of those three things that we talked about, we have to look at the stakeholders who are impacted by that, right? So each one you take, right? So you take academic administration. So if we don't take faculty members on board, right, then you are in for big trouble. What do we mean by taking them on board? Taking them on board means, so ensuring that they are comfortable with the technology that is being given, right? So they are provided sufficient training, they are given sufficient heads up, and of course they are also ensure that they are provided sufficient assistance, right? Because in many places, so there could be very senior professors who may not have time to go through it. Because one of the important things about many of these, when the moment you bring in technology, is that everything is data driven, right? So if there is no data that is coming in, the system just cannot function. And so there you may run into challenges wherein some very busy professors may not have time to upload all the data. Then the institution must make sure that they are given help in the form of assistants or who can feed in the data on behalf of the professors, right? Because that is, if they don't get their data acquisition plan, I think it's going to fail. And so you can either get the data by taking the stakeholders on board, or you provide them sufficient assistance, right? If you don't do either one of them, then it is bound to fail. So I think bringing a very good understanding of who are all the stakeholders involved in whatever you are trying to do, and taking them on board. So taking them on board includes making it easy for them and providing them with sufficient training. I think that is probably an extremely important step.
All right. So I think, there's a very nice framework that we also use internally. It's called the ADKAR framework. And many of these technology tools, when they're adopted, they form part of change of an institution, and there's oftentimes resistance from various stakeholders. And your point of taking people along, training them well, making them comfortable, handling their concerns if there are any, is absolutely well taken. And I believe that goes a long way in making sure that there is bang for buck or return on investment when indeed that technology goes live. And one of my favorite authors, Robin Sharma, said that all change is hard at the start, messy in the middle, and gorgeous at the end.
Wow.
So that messy in the middle part has to be handled really well by techniques that you suggested of training, taking people along, etc. So point very well taken, Prof. RC. Um, a flip side to this question: what should one not do at all when they're adopting change or technology tools like these? Any So what is an absolute no from your side?
Wow, that's a good question. What is an absolute no? I think if there has to be a champion. Okay, so one has to identify a champion who will drive this. And without having that particular champion driving these changes, I think that's a big no-no. I think, you see, notwithstanding all the good intentions that the senior management might be having, right? So, for example, right? So I'm sure all of everybody is ready to learn, and all the audience who are here, they are also here to learn. What are the exciting things that are happening? But then that is good for saying that, okay, these are good things to do. But then if you don't identify a champion who will do this, then it will be a dead investment. I think that is something that I want to be a bit blunt about. So we have to have, I mean, taking the stakeholders along and all that is anyway there. But then you need a champion to drive this. You need that champion to talk to those stakeholders and take them along. Because if you ask the vendor to do that, that's not going to work. If you expect that the management is trying to invest a lot of money, and then you put the blame, I will not say the blame, but at least you shift the responsibility on the service provider, and then say that, okay, come on, take us on board. That's not going to work. I think if you ask me, the biggest no would be absence of champion. Yeah.
Well said. So I think every initiative, large or small, needs a champion and someone who can take the accountability,
Yes.
drive forward with all the resistance or the obstacles that might
Yes.
come in. And I think, again, a very, very valid point. You talked of the dependence on vendor, but that dovetails very beautifully into my next question, that a lot of technology that people adopt is primarily being bought from external vendors. Although institutions today do have some sort of smaller teams, at least the mid to large size institutions. Small institutions would typically not have an internal IT team or a technology team, and they would have to rely on a vendor for getting some of these technology adoptions going in their institution. Uh, how does one go about selecting the right vendor when you're evaluating any tool or technology that you want to adopt? How have you gone about at Triple ITB or in your own personal capacity? What are the things you look for? Again, what are the traps that you look for? How can we give these insights to our audience today?
I think that's a very good question, and that's a very important question as well, because at the end of the day, I think even before I answer that specific question, which is assuming that one may want to go with a vendor, but even before you do that, there may be questions saying that, should I go with the vendor or should I do it in house, right? So the classic build versus buy kind of quandary will be there. And I would imagine that in general today the technology, thanks to lots of newer technologies, my answer might probably have been slightly different some time back, but today with all the cloud technology that is there, with computing powers available on tap, and all the software as a service kind of paradigms which are emerging, pay as you use, right? So all these things have made it extremely attractive not to build software on your own, right? So I think due to because one of the main reasons why I'm saying that is that is not the core competency of an education institution. And I can say that even being an institution of information technology, we ourselves are not interested in doing that, because obviously our core interest, okay, now maybe I should not even be using core competency, but my core function is different, right? So even the competency is there, but that's not my function. I'm not a software development shop, right? I don't want to manage large software development teams and things like that. I'm an education institution. So I would rather, that is probably, you can consider this as my opinion, because there might be other opinions as well on that one. So assuming that we would want to go with a service provider and a vendor and things like that. So what are the things that you want to look for, right? Uh, I think this is, in fact, if that is the path you are taking, that is exactly where you should start involving the stakeholders right from the beginning. So you should one should form a committee which will bring in these different perspectives, right? So a representative from the administration, a representative from the finance, of course, some professors who will be actually teaching and so on. So setting up of that multi responsibility committee would be a great starting point, right? So once you have that, and then it boils down to looking for different features that are of interest to my institution, what are the different functions and things like that. But in terms of what do you look for in a vendor, I would rather talk, okay, in fact, we can split that into two, right? What do you look for in the product and what do you look for in the vendor? Because I believe these two are different. Because you may be having a great product, but if the vendor is not up to the mark, it can be disaster, right? On the other hand, even if the product is not up to the mark, but if you have extremely supportive vendor, you can actually shake things up, right? It will, I mean, sooner or later, it's going to measure up, right? But the other way, it's a no-go, right? So if you have a great product, if there's nobody available to support you to you get the best out of it, I don't think that will be a good investment, right? So what do we look for in the product?
That's very interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah, because yeah, what you look for in the product, I mean, there are so many cheat sheets available, right? So what do you look for? What features are important for an education institutions? I don't think that's the difficult part, right? And it's only a question of taking that big laundry list, sit with your committee, you prioritize what is it that important for our institution, and then you bombard those questions to the vendor, right? So you get the response, and then you can take your call, right? But the second element is to evaluate the vendor themselves, right? So which is because, especially this is, we should understand that this is expected to be a long-term journey, right? This is not like a one-time product we are buying. It's not like a desktop product. It's not like a PDF converter. You know, you install it, you run it. Yeah, 99.99% of them, it's going to do the job because it's going to do only one thing, right? And a larger piece of software on which your entire institution is going to rely on is not going to be like that. So I'm actually embarrassed to be saying, as a software professional myself, that unfortunately software is never perfect. Okay. In fact, many of my colleagues who work in aerospace engineering, they actually say that, you know, I mean, he says it's unbelievable that you guys are able to get away by saying that, you know, your software is, 95% bug free. I mean, this aerospace is saying, I mean, I can't say that. I mean, there's only 5% of the chance that the plane will crash, right? They cannot afford to do that. But anyway, so, but yeah, that's my profession. I apologize on behalf of the software professionals out there. But so given that there are likely to be gaps, it may not necessarily be defects, right? So we are saying there could be gaps between what the institution wants versus what the product is able to provide. So how do you bridge that gap? To bridge that gap, the vendor and the institution has to talk. right? So there has to be a very mature understanding between the two parties to understand the vendor to understand the pain points of the institution, and at the same time, the institution also has to be sympathetic to the issues and the complexities that the software has to deal with, right? So that establishing that kind of a rapport is extremely important. So to that extent, having a very good support structure, for example, right? I'm not saying it has to be 24/7 and things like that. If it is international kind of an institution, yeah, we can definitely talk to the vendor about that. But what we are saying is, there has to be some kind of a very responsive kind of a person who are not very sticklers to rules, saying that, okay, I had an SLA of whatever, 12 hours. So why are you calling me up? Because it's only 10 hours now for a response, right? So no, with that kind of an understanding, so getting a good product is definitely important, but getting good service is equally important as well, which is where the second part is managed with a good by having a good vendor, and of course the first the features and everything is managed by having a good product. So I think
Sounds good. I'll just delve a little deeper into this. So I understand you've emphasized when it comes to the vendor, the ability to provide support. But when you're initially choosing a vendor, let's say there are many solutions being bought in today's world, ERPs, LMSs, smart classes, some focus software on, let's say, conducting surveys or admissions and email softwares, communications. There's an explosion in the edtech world right now. So the support is one part which can be discussed by institutions at the start. But what else do they also look at when they are evaluating the vendor upfront? Because sometimes these investments can be very expensive, not only from an upfront cost perspective, but also the time that an institution goes to invest to implement.
absolutely.
And if that doesn't go right, then there is much at loss for the institution.
Absolutely. Yes. I think that's exactly. So the ability to support, obviously, as you said, is just one aspect of it. But from a larger perspective, we need a vendor who is stable, right? So we don't want fly by night kind of people who deliver the software and then who are themselves not sure whether they will be around or not, right? So that is probably a huge risk. So which is why in most of the, especially because since as you also mentioned in my introduction, so I do serve in a lot of committees and wherein formal tenders are written. So the financial stability of the company, for example, is one of the important parameters that shows how stable that company is and how likely they are to partner with you in the long term. As I said, it is just not a vendor-customer relationship we are talking about. So we should be looking at more as a partnership here. That's a very, very good point. That kind of escaped my attention. Thank you for that.
Sounds great. Thanks for that. If I do a quick time check, we're about 6 to 8 minutes left now. So let me get into some of the other sectors and maybe you could give us a quick view on that from your side. So the Indian edtech sector is booming right now. You look at incredible funding coming in, great adoption at the grassroots level, edtech adoption going to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities as well with the mobile penetration that has happened. There is a massive surge in, if I go by looking at valuations of companies like Byju's, etc. I also look at it on the ground around me where, the mothers are teaching their kids sitting at home on mobile phones. There's just technology all around us, and which has obviously been accelerated by the pandemic situation. Do you think it's a bubble or is it here to stay?
I think it is here to stay. I'll tell you why. This is something because I think this disruption, whatever we are talking about, has lasted long enough for us to get used to it. Okay, so now that we are already used to it, right? So you already must be seeing lots of fun WhatsApp videos wherein the kids saying that no, I don't want to go to school now, right?
Right.
Honestly, let me straight away tell you that's a very bad idea. So I think kids should definitely go to school. We are talking more in the higher education space, right? So in the higher education space, definitely, I think the whatever technologies we have been seeing around, it will stay. Okay, I don't think it's going anywhere. Now, it is entirely up to the education institutions to figure out a way to live with it. Because I will also tell you, I will also back this statement with a couple of interesting things, right? So if, I'm sure education institutions more than corporates would be tracking this, right? As to what UGC has been doing, what AICT has been doing. So UGC is now formally legitimizing online degrees now, right? So now they are permitting universities to offer 100% online degrees, right? IIT Madras is offering BSc, which was unthinkable some time back, right? So I think that is proof enough for me that it is here to stay. I think that I don't really think there's anything more for me to add there. Yeah, it's going
Sounds
to be
good. All right. So this EdTech sector boom is here to stay, is what Professor RC feels. My next question is, before we go into the last round with some interesting questions, if we do some crystal ball, gazing, Professor RC, how would classrooms look like in 2025? Can you kind of paint that picture for us and for the audience here?
Okay, that's an excellent question. So in 2025, the way I see it, online degree granting programs will become legal for sure.
Okay.
Okay. So what will that what that will do is this, we only keep talking about lifelong learning more euphemistically and more as a figure of speech. Lifelong learning will become a reality. Okay, tangible lifelong learning will be a reality. So which means that upskilling, and so people will no longer have to, this whole 10 plus 2 plus 4 plus, so that probably will get broken sooner or later. Okay, it is very interesting for those who are not familiar, and I'm sure you understand that this thing got broken in the Western education long time back, right? So we have seen, right? So 50-year-old coming and sitting in the class for going back to school, right? So a lot of micro education will become a reality, right? It will no longer be about spending 2 years or 4 years in engineering education and then walking out with a degree and at the end of the 4 years in one go. So this whole thing in terms of micro education, because even the national education policy already talks about micro credits, right? So now people by 2025, when you talk about it, I think that is really going to be a new thing. Universities will be forced to offer micro credits, right? So people will be able to collect these credits from anywhere, and all of these credit transfers across universities, everything is going to be enabled by technology. Without technology, we cannot do it, but that is probably what I would think will happen.
Makes sense. Some nice insights there. And I think just for the audience, I'm sure many of you are aware that the national education policy tries to bring in some of this flexibility that Professor RC was referring to in terms of a 10 plus 2 plus 3 kind of a structure being further made flexible and not very straitjacketed as it stands today. So fair points, Professor RC. Now we go to the last round before I open it up for questions for the audience. Interestingly, like every show that involves tea and talk, it should end with a rapid fire is what my sense is. And so let's do some quick rapid fire with you, Professor RC. So what time of the day are you most productive?
Mornings, early morning.
Early mornings, like a true professor, I would say. What's the best technology tool you have used personally in your personal life?
Learning management systems excite me the most. The potential of learning management systems excite me the most. And most, if you want me to name the tool, it is Moodle. Moodle, many people, yeah, it's incredible. Anyway, it's rapid fire, so I'm not supposed to clarify.
What's the best technology tool you have used professionally? Although this Moodle part would come in, it's a overlap there, but any other technology tool that you believe?
Okay, so if I can go back to the previous question, then mobile technology is probably the most one that has excited me.
Okay.
From a professional point of view, it is Moodle.
Moodle. All right. Which institution across the globe are you inspired by and why? So we'll add the why, just, it's anti-rapid fire, but still we'd like to know.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one, Arpit. Which institution? See, in general, as a nation also, I think we don't have to be ashamed of that system, leading Western institution, right? Especially from the US and so on. So it always, the whole education system actually fascinates me. Okay, I don't even have to name a specific institution, because the diversity that it provides for people to learn. I know what bothers me the most in the current education system is this, the word you used is straight jacketing, right? So that is the extreme. So I think we have to break those shackles, and I admire all institutions which give you an opportunity to break those shackles.
Wonderful thought that. And final rapid fire is, what words have inspired you or continue to inspire you?
Change. Change is the only constant.
All right.
So that is something that I always keep telling myself. So if any surprise comes my way, I said, okay, time to change, and don't be surprised that it is a change. I think that's something that keeps inspiring me.
Wonderful. So we are on time now. I think there are some great insights that Professor RC has offered us today, starting with his ADA framework for automation, and then talking about the various challenges, the learnings when adopting technology, the people part of it, making people around comfortable, taking them along, as techy as it may sound, but it has to be people first whenever there is a technology initiative that is adopted within an institution as well. So some great thoughts, and then his own personal thoughts on the tools that he has used. So we are open to now questions from the audience. We'll probably have one or two questions and then close for the day. As I said, we'll be true to our time in EduAction with Arpit. So any questions from the audience, you can type it in on your chat bot here. I see Dr. PSV Ramana Rao, Dr. Sheelan Mishra. Any questions from you? I'm just going with the doctors first. Dr. Sandeep Petkar. You're the smartest ones in the room. And then there is the other audience. Okay, I got one on my direct message. So Professor RC, this is for you. What should teachers be ready for as they move forward in the next few years? Because a lot of teachers are across the, different age brackets, and there is that propensity to adopt new tools, etc., varies. But what should they be ready for as we progress in this technology explosion?
Question. And you know what? I think that's a wonderful question, because what I have seen, the ease with which the teachers have adapted during this pandemic period, it's amazing. I mean, I'm not talking about higher education, I'm talking about school teachers here, right? So which kind of goes on to show that it is just possible. So our salute to our teachers. If they apply their mind to anything, they have shown that it is possible. So what does it need? All it needs is an open mind, right? I think I will not say you need to know how to use computers, you need to know how to do this. See, those things can be learned. The willingness to learn and adapt, I think, as I said, change and change yourself. I think that is probably the most important thing. and everything will fall in place. Because I mean, you may be wondering, okay, so if I don't have the technology, what do I do? Yeah, I know of lots of institutions, which the institutions have provided them with the necessary gadgets, right? So I don't think that should be the worry. I think, be open, be willing to learn. I think you'll do wonderfully well.
Sounds great. There are last two questions. I see one from Miss Urbi. She asks, what are your thoughts on the digital divide? And she says that many say the national education policy is a farce. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, what is the solution to digital divide? I think the solution is to bridge the divide, right? And efforts are constantly being made, right? And as Mr. Arpit also mentioned in the beginning, very interesting. The drivers for that bridging that digital divide is actually not coming from the government; it's coming from the people in terms of the adoption of mobile. Right, if somebody the mobile penetration has really changed the game for the country, and that is what is actually laying the path and bridging that particular divide, right? Because I do know of our own higher education students who have gone on to remote places where they don't have this classic fiber optic network coming into their places, but then the mobile technology is keeping them afloat, right? So I think the digital divide, there is constantly innovations that are happening, and sooner or later, I think that divide will come down rapidly, right?
All
Because
right.
yeah, yeah.
And
And
last question is from,
and
sorry, go ahead.
and sorry, I think for the other part, NEP 2020 is a farce. I think it's definitely a debatable kind of a point. I think I would like to disagree on that. Yeah.
Okay. Last question is from Sudhendu. He asks, how do you learn technology considering yourself as a student, because mostly you teach technology as a teacher?
Yeah, I mean, so that's why it is, there's no need to be embarrassed, is one thing. There are many things that I actually call my own student and say that, no, you, in fact, right? So obviously they are the ones who are a lot more comfortable, right? So many times I just call my son to figure out, no, no, how do you do this thing, right? So don't be, I don't know, just be open and be frank and learn, right? So no matter from whom the learning is coming, I think that should be
great. That wraps up our questions for today. Thank you to the audience who has joined us and spent their time on a Friday evening. And special thanks, obviously, to Professor RC for all the insights that have been provided to us today in this wonderful first session of EduAction with Arpit Barjatia. I would like to thank you once again and accept in spirit, a bouquet from our side, which, there's no digital version of with us right now. But I'm sure there's a lot to learn, a lot to do in the coming times. And there's a great new opportunity that these times have presented, and a time for all of us, as Professor RC also pointed out, to be a student at all times without any hangups. So on that wonderful note, I think I'll end the session for today. Thank you once again for your time, and take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye from EduAction.
It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.